I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my expose on the history of Magic the Gathering. This week I have the next of the box sets that were released in the early days, Anthologies. Now this was a 120 card set that was released in November of 1998, celebrating the 5th anniversary of Magic the Gathering. It consisted of two 60-card pre-constructed decks. These decks consisted of cards from everything from Alpha up until Urza's Saga, so it was from every expansion and every set released up until then. It also contained 5 tokens for each of these pre-constructed decks, and a 64-page booklet that talked about the past of Magic, what had happened in its history, what's going on currently in its present, and what they're planning for in the future. This same booklet also included some kind of an excerpt from the thoughts of Richard Garfield, the creator of Magic the Gathering, about how things were going. It came with a storage box that could hold 350 cards in the standard sleeve. There were a couple of differences between its cards and every other card. First off, they were all white bordered. They had for a copyright date, 1993 to 1998, so it had the entire years of Magic. And if it was an expansion, it had the expansion symbol on it. So it didn't have, this set did not have its own expansion symbol, but if it would have an actual expansion that the card was originally part of, it would include that symbol on these cards still. So if it was an Arabian Nights card, it'd be a white bordered Arabian Nights card, similar to what they did in Chronicles. So the two different decks were a white-green control-oriented deck called Defenders of the Cause. The tokens associated with this was 5 Pegasi tokens. And the other deck was a black-red aggro-oriented deck called Dark Alliance with 5 Goblin tokens as the tokens it had with it. Now each of these sets had 5 rares in it, so that was the number of rares each of them had, and there was a big number of misprints that actually occurred within these sets. Armored Pegasus, Mog Raider, Samite Healer, and Warrior's Honor all had the wrong mana costs on them. Carnivorous Plant and Goblin Hero have the wrong expansion symbol on them. Miri Cat Warrior was printed as a 2-2 when it should have been a 2-3, like the original card. And of course, Raging Goblin took elements from both its Exodus version and its Portal version and combined them into one card. Picture from one, quotation from the other. Now the set did sell originally for $20, but of course it's gone up since then. And the cards are technically considered tournament legal. Now, when we take it, we compare it a little bit to Chronicles. Chronicles was considered more of an expansion, and you could use them in the tournaments of the time. This set was not considered the same way. It was considered its own thing, and the cards, if you would look at them, if one of them would be legal in whatever type of tournament you're using it in, then it's legal there. If you were using the standard at the time, which was based around Urza's Saga, the Urza's Saga cards in here, they were perfectly legal. But there was a lot of older things that were not tournament legal. So it was taken by an individual card-by-card basis, rather than something like Chronicles, which when it came out, everything in it was considered legal for the tournaments at the time. Now, there are some cards that have been reprinted in 5th edition, and when you look at those cards, in fact, they look surprisingly like the cards from 5th edition. The only way to tell the difference between these and their 5th edition counterparts, copyright date. That is literally the only way to tell them apart. Otherwise, they're perfect reprints of the 5th edition cards. Now, let's talk about some of the cards from this set. I want to go over the 5 rares that were in each of the decks. Those are probably the ones that stand out most as the most important ones to talk about. There was Armageddon in the green-white deck. You used it, you could destroy all lands in play. It's a classic one that dates back all the way to Alpha, of course. There's Brushland. It's a pain land. You could either tap it for a colorless, or you could tap it for a white and green, and you would take 1 damage. It's one of the pain lands that came out, kind of replacing the dual lands, of course. So there's Jalum Tome. 2, tap it. You could draw a card, but you had to discard a card. It's again another one that's pretty decent. Miri Cat Warrior. That's the Cat Warrior I was talking about that has a misprinted error. Of course, she is normally supposed to be a 2-3 that has First Strike, Vigilance, and Forest Walk. She's pretty good and pretty decent to have in a deck even nowadays for the mana cost and what she gets for it. And the last card that was in the white-green deck was Sacred Mesa. Now, at the beginning of your upkeep, you had to sacrifice a Pegasus token, but for a colorless and a white, you could put a Pegasus token into play. So as long as you had a colorless and white open, you could keep the enchantment out, and any extra colorless and white you had, you could keep getting Pegasus tokens over and over again to get a large amount of them. That's where the Pegasus tokens came into play, that they gave you 5 of them. Nowadays, I would use dice on top of one of these cards to represent multiple ones. That's just my way of doing things nowadays, so... But let's move on to the 5 rares from the black-red deck. There's Goblin King, another classic one from back in the days of Alpha. He's a 1/1 goblin that all other goblins get +1/+1 in Mountain Walk. He's not a bad card for a goblin deck. Goblin Warren. It was an enchantment from Fallen Empires that actually is pretty good. For 2 colorless and a red, you can sacrifice 2 goblins to get 3 goblin tokens. This is the way to get goblin tokens. Well, one of the ways to get goblin tokens in this deck. But this one, you can get rid of 2 to get 3. I mean, it costs you a lot of mana, but if you don't have anything else to do, you can just get goblins like that. Nevinyrral's Disc comes into play tapped. For 1 and tapping it, you could sacrifice it to destroy all artifacts, enchantments, and creatures in play. A classic destroy everything card from Alpha. There's, of course, Volcanic Dragon, a 4/4 flying haste dragon. Pretty not bad, but it was one of the rares from this set. And then Strip Mine, which technically hadn't started out as a rare, but sort of ended up in that position. It is a land that you can either tap it for a colorless, or tap and sacrifice it to destroy a land. By this point in time, Strip Mine has sort of been moving out of the purview of folks, but, you know, it still existed enough to show up in this deck here. So that's it for today. I talked about Anthologies, a box set collection showing off 2 decks that Magic had pre-made, talking a little bit about those decks, kind of the compositions of them, their roles of them, and why Magic put out this set here, just a little bit of the reasoning behind it. It was to celebrate their 5th anniversary and celebrate they had 5 great years, that they were still going strong at this point in time. They'd gotten past their sort of weak point, low point, and moved on to greater things that they're showing off a little bit of it with this box set. So if you have any questions, comments, anything you say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel, the Empire, and the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, linked in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.